offering. Lord, we welcome you here this morning. We thank you for this, that we can celebrate to know that he is here, he is alive, he is with us. We have a reason to sing this morning because he has given us a song in our heart. He has lifted us up out of the pit and set our feet on a rock. My eyes have seen the risen one, shining like the sun. He came to rescue me. The curse of sin and shame are done, and death is overcome. The day he came for me. Come on, sing it out. And now I have a song to sing, for I was lost when Jesus you found me. Now I live forever free. I was lost when Jesus you found me. The cross standing in my place, and every debt is paid. I stand in victory. The curse of sin and shame are done, and death is overcome. The day he came for me. And now I have a song to sing. I was lost when Jesus you found me. Now I live forever free. I was lost when Jesus you found me. You're my God. You are my God, and I will praise you, praise you.
For all you've done, yes, I will praise you.
You are my God, and I exalt you, exalt you. For all you've done, yes, I exalt you. You are my God, and I will praise you, praise you. For all you've done, yes, I will praise you. You are my God, and I exalt you, exalt you. For all you've done, yes, I exalt you. Now I have a song to sing. I was lost,
Then Jesus you found.
now I live
Forever free. I was lost, then Jesus you found me. Now I have a song to sing. I was lost, then Jesus you found me. Now I live forever free. I was lost, then Jesus you found me. You are my God, and I will praise you, praise you. For all you've done, yes, I will praise you. You are my God, and I exalt you, exalt you. For all you've done, yes, I exalt you.
Lift it up to the Lord this morning. God, we bless your name. God, we bless your name. Thank you. You may be seated. It's great to be with you here in worship today. The band and the singers are going to slide out. I just want to welcome you to Calvary. If you're a guest, we're so glad that you're here today. We're going to recognize a special group of folks here. You see, some of us have these orange T-shirts on. This was our Kids Stuff Recognition Day. And Kids Stuff in any time. Won't you stand up right now? Let's let everybody see. Of course, they can probably spot the orange. Or if you forgot your T-shirt, Tyler, you forgot your T-shirt, that's okay. But there's a lot of folks, there's a lot of college students that aren't here today that serve in kids stuff. When the kids leave here, they go to an environment where there is music. There are several drama sketches that are usually really funny. They're throwing out Twinkies today. Not to all the kids, but they're just throwing out, so get them on a sugar high. But they use engaging stories, and they tell things in a way that's going to be memorable to them. And these volunteers take rotation based on the schedule and when it falls. We started this this is 15. About 7 years ago, we started this here on this stage during the summer thing. I said, we'll just do it for 4 or 5 weeks, and it'll be done with it. And it's grown to where we have a full team of tech and singers and actors every week that rotate in there. And I appreciate them so much, their flexibility, last-minute casting calls, things like that we sometimes need last minute. And they're always so flexible, not just to come in and do it, but they have a memorized script that they get up in front of the kids and perform. And a lot of times when we get up there, I tell them if we have fun with it, they'll have fun with it. And it usually turns out that way. But the whole purpose of what we do down there is to engage your kids so that you all have something to talk about when you get home. When we're talking about this life app of honesty, that they have maybe had a memorable, funny event that's help plant that seed so that when we go home, that you all have things to talk about. When you get those papers from Sunday school, when you get those little activity things, those widgets each month, that you do those, because kids stuff is great, and I love these folks here, and they're volunteering and doing this. But what happens with you and your children at home is more important than what we do downstairs. It's important, and I need them there. But what happens from that springboarding down to your home when you're riding home and they talk about that life app of honesty and how you can apply it in your life and in your family, that's the most important thing. And so everything we do in kid stuff is to help you and your family when you get home with it. When you're living it Monday through Saturday, and you get back here and get a little refresher. So help me give these folks a hand. There's many, many more. We probably got out 45 people on our team. Thank you, guys. You all can have a seat. I think Tommy was in the very first kids stuff that we did here on this stage, and all the kids just sat down here in the front. And it was a great time. And now many of you all have put in the work a lot. If you've ever been down to the kids stuff theater where the big silver door is, that used to be 2 or 3 classrooms, and a lot of volunteers came in there and transformed that, built a stage, knocked walls out. You couldn't breathe in there before, and it's a great room. And you made that possible, even if you're never acted in kids stuff before. There's a lot of you in this room that have painted in that room and built things and made it what it is. And so I appreciate that as well. It's a great environment, a place for our kids to go. And speaking of that, I'm going to dismiss them now out to kids stuff. This is our last one of the year, of the season. We start back again on August 9th, which is back the week right before going back to school, kids. Yay! You don't want to hear that. But I appreciate them so much, and they're going to be dismissed. Our ushers, I want to ask them to come forward as well. I just wanted to recognize that team and for all their leadership and giving. And then as I was saying that, just thought of all those people that gave that may not have been in the cast or anything like that. But, 6 or 7 years ago when we transformed that building, they painted, they knocked out walls, they did all that stuff to lay a foundation for kids to come in there and have an environment where they could learn on their level in a way that engaged them. And it is the giving that we all have the opportunity to take part of now that helps to lay that foundation for future generations, not just in our church, but what we do as a church and our mission that reaches people all around the world, reaches people in our city. And so as you give today, you're giving towards things like that. We have a lot of the kids that have these orange t-shirts on that were once sitting down here on the floor watching kids stuff. And now they're part of the cast. They're part of the tech. They're part of the leadership of that. And so the people that knocked those walls out and painted played a big part in even equipping those new leaders, those young folks that are stepping up to lead in new ways. And so
you for
name. Amen. Amen.
And going in and out of those of your God. Lack of this only to consider live God, not weeks and attribute yourselves to shouldn't be defeated. Stop doing that. Stop doing that for a minute. Step out of the situation and don't even think about that right now and just go over to the Lord and just be near Him and just seek His face and just start leaning in to where He wants you to be as a man, as a woman. Separate from the conflict. You know, we're not talking about that yet. We're talking about you and the Lord. Let me just ask you, I know this is a question you've heard guys ask before, people like me. Has there ever been a time that you can think of in your life when you were closer to God than you are right now? And are you in conflict? Come near to God and He will come near to you. Now you're not in opposition to God. He's not at war with you. He's with you. He will come near to you. The way to get what you really want in life is to surrender what you want to God. To die to yourself into that area. And I know what you're thinking, because I've thought it too. You're thinking, if I surrender what I want to God, well then will God end up, is that a tricky way to get God to give me what I want? Is that how this will work? You know, maybe. You might end up, yeah, but maybe not. Maybe not. I'll tell you this, He will always give you what you need. And it may be a month or a year or 5 years, you look back and go, oh God, thank you so much that you didn't give me what I wanted at that time. Thank you that you gave me what I need instead, because I was just certain, I was 100% positive. I just knew that that's what I wanted and that's the way. And when I surrendered to you and I stepped back and maybe He gave it to you and maybe He didn't give it to you, you will always look back and be glad of where and when you surrendered to God and what He did in the situation. Every time. You show me any conflict that's going on, whether it's in a family, a marriage, or even between nations. If you let the parties involved get empty of themselves and what they want and full of God and what He wants, there is no conflict that cannot be solved. Matthew 18:15 spells out what I think is the clearest call in all of Scripture for us to walk in reconciliation. And it just outlines it. And this is maybe a familiar Scripture for some of you. You've read it. Whether we've applied it or not is a whole other issue. It says this: if your brother, and if I ever say brother, you can just put in parentheses sister. It works with everybody. If your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. If he hears you, you've gained your brother. Now, Jesus begins by saying, if your brother sins against you. Let me just break this down, okay, and walk us through that. This is a call to consider if you've truly been sinned against, or you're just getting emotional. I mean, did what they do, or was it really a sin, and was it really against you? Sin means someone has violated Scripture and offended God. And then you got caught up in that offense. The fact that you just disagree with somebody doesn't necessarily mean that they've actually sinned. If a brother sins against you, that's the premise, and make sure that that's what's really happened. Jesus said, go and tell him his fault. Because we need to be honest with ourselves and with those who've offended us. You don't need to walk around because it's unfair and it's risky to pretend, oh, I'm not offended. Oh, that didn't bother me. That didn't bother me. No, I'm not mad. No, I'm not. What's wrong? Nothing. You ever notice how you can tell if nothing's wrong with your spouse by the way they say nothing? Nothing. Nothing? Nothing. I mean, you can. Don't pretend if it's a valid issue, and oh my goodness, and I feel like I'm just, if I go too far and you get your feelings hurt, you send me an email tomorrow or the next day, or if you or don't. But sometimes we're just too sensitive. We just let everything, well, that hurt my feelings. I mean, come on. And I feel like we're breeding that. We're raising up a generation of hypersensitive people. And everything we say is like this loaded thing, that, oh, that hurt, or that, oh, you were not being, I think, oh, and I understand some of that's legitimate, and we need to be more careful, and we need to be tender-hearted to one another, but folks, come on. I mean, don't be so easily upset. I saw someone on television on the news the other night got up and said, well, we are outraged. And in my heart I thought, no, you're not. That's fake outrage. I can spot that. That's pretend outrage so that you can say we're outraged. And I think, oh, it didn't really bother you that much, but it was a good opportunity for you to make your point. And you see people, you see politicians do it, you see political parties do it, you see whole nations do it. Oh, we as a people were offended. And I think, well, you kinda, but you do it in your marriage, you do it with your brothers and sisters, and you do it with your friends. He says, if your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault. Just go and tell him. Approach the person. If you ignore that, it's just going to fuel those pent-up emotions. And what was a little thing, now resentment's going to grow. And Jesus says the problem needs to be solved. And he says this next little phrase, between you and him alone. That didn't just slip in. In the original Greek, that means between you and him alone. We need to keep others out of it at this point. When you gossip and when you talk about it, has that ever, what does it do? It multiplies the problem in a body of believers, and it opens the door to division with your friends. And then other people, now what they're going to do is take up an offense on your behalf, and then teams begin to build, and and you've seen that happen. I've seen it happen in churches and in homes and in families. I've seen these alliances shift. In my family, my extended family, somebody gets hurt and they get on the phone and they call the cousin, and then the cousin tells the mama, and all of a sudden, and this person they've got there, and it builds. And in mine, it'll shift over the years. Or, well, now I'm on this team and now I'm on that, and oh my goodness. He says, just go tell the person. Okay. Go tell that person, tell him his fault, and tell it to them alone. And then he says this, if he hears you. And I know for some of you, you're thinking, that's a big if, because they're not going to listen. Well, I understand, but that's on their side. What you're concerned about is what's on your side. You're trying to fix your side. If he hears you, that raises the issue of our responsibility to listen when we're confronted. Just listen. Everybody's healing depends on you listening. Ideally, forgiveness will be extended between parties and the relationship will be saved. But if your words are ignored, take the situation to God and try another approach. Sometimes God's going to give you something to do, the next right thing, maybe something you hadn't even thought about. Leave room for the fact, this is going to hurt a little, this is going to sting. Leave room for the fact that you might be wrong. You ever been halfway through an argument with somebody or something and you realize you're wrong and you don't know how to get out of it now? That's just your pride. I mean, you might be wrong about it. And sometimes if you stop, before you start talking and telling all your friends and getting this all, stop and think about, that I shouldn't have said that. Or I see how I fueled this because I did that. I'm wrong. But don't forget, we're responsible to be active and careful listeners. I think a big part of why conflicts happen is we didn't really hear what the other person meant to say or was trying to communicate. We imposed on, well, you said, no, that's not what I said. I said, and how many times has that happened because we just weren't listening? And then Jesus defines the success with resolution, with these words. He says, you've gained your brother. The goal of honest confrontation is to regain the friendship, regain the relationship, not further damage it, not just to win in that moment. Aim for a win-win outcome so that nobody walks away from the encounter shamed or rejected. Victory is not putting somebody in their place and strutting away. It's winning them back as a brother or a sister. That's the win. That's the win. I heard an old story, and you've probably heard it, but there was a guy on a desert island, and he had been stranded there for some time, and he was finally rescued, and the rescuers noticed that there are 3 huts near the beach, and they said, well, what's that building? And he goes, well, that's where I live. That's my home. And they said, well, what's that second one? He goes, oh, that's my church. That's where I worship. He goes, what's that third building? He said, oh, that's the church where I used to go. I think even by ourselves, even with just one other person, it can be a Hatfield and a McCoy. Folks, next weekend, we'll home and future. And person.
Oh, Jesus, will ever stay. Oh, surrender.